Hello, everyone. My name is Sebastian Cantero, and my inquiry presentation is titled The Paradox of Inclusion and Excellence, Rethinking Lifelong Learning in Higher Education. Today, I want to examine a trend that feels inevitable and even virtuous on its surface, the rapid expansion of higher education into a world of lifelong learning. Universities are trying to make education available to everyone at all times and in all formats. They want to be flexible and accessible and open. These goals sound admirable. But I want to question the assumption that more access is always better and that universal participation necessarily leads to a stronger society. My argument is that lifelong learning is valuable, but the way we are pursuing it is undermining academic rigor, distorting the meaning of a college degree, and creating a system where inclusivity quietly displaces excellence. In our effort to serve everyone, we may be serving no one well. According to the Pew Research Center's report, lifelong learning will be the new normal. Constant skill renewal is becoming a requirement rather than an option. Automation, artificial intelligence, and global competition are challenging the nature of work. In this environment, adults must continuously reskill just to keep up. Pew calls this shift a new cultural and economic reality. But they also warn that society is unprepared for what requires. We do not have the systems, infrastructure, or cultural mindset needed to sustain high quality lifelong learning. We have expanded access faster than we have expanded quality. We have built an open door, but we have not built the house behind it. This creates a tension. The more we push for universal access, the more we risk diluting the standards that once made higher education meaningful. The paradox is that inclusivity without excellence leads to a system that is crowded, busy, and constantly producing credentials, but not producing mastery. Historically, universities were designed as elite institutions. Not elite in the sense of privilege, but in the classical sense of elite, meaning excellent. They were places built around the pursuit of arete, the highest human flourishing. Students were not expected to be customers, they were expected to be scholars. Over time, as access expanded through the 20th century, higher education shifted from an elite model to a mass model. This shift was good in many ways. It opened doors, it created mobility, it democratized opportunity, but it also introduced a problem that we are living with today. As degrees become more common, their symbolic value declined. When almost everyone has a bachelor's degree, employers can no longer assume that the degree signifies any particular level of knowledge or skill. This is credential inflation. Degrees still matter, but they no longer mean what they once did. Chris De La Rocas describes this transformation in his article, Higher Education in a World Where Students Never Graduate. He argues that education has become less about a period of intense disciplinary training and more about a lifelong subscription service. People continuously enroll, accumulate certificates, and move in and out of programs. On the surface, this is framed as modern, flexible, and empowering, but there's a deeper concern hidden beneath the optimism. If education is continuous and endless, when does mastery occur? When is learning deep enough to signify something real? When does a credential stand as evidence of anything beyond participation? A system that encourages constant re-enrollment can end up prioritizing quantity over quality and movement over achievement. When education becomes transactional, it loses its soul. Jonathan Haidt offers a powerful explanation for how we arrived here. In The Coddling of the American Mind, Haidt argues that institutions have elevated the moral value of care above all other moral foundations. Compassion is important, belonging is important, but when care becomes the dominant lens through which every decision is filtered, institutions begin to avoid discomfort at all costs, and learning is fundamentally uncomfortable. Real learning requires challenge, confrontation with gaps in understanding, and exposure to perspectives that unsettle us. When universities prioritize emotional comfort, they unintentionally erode rigor. They soften expectations. They prioritize feelings over growth. They overcorrect. The moral overcorrection leads to policies that reduce academic challenge in the name of support, even though challenge and support must coexist for genuine development to occur. Tom Nichols deepens this critique in The Death of Expertise. Nichols argues that modern cultures have rejected the idea of expertise deserves special respect. In an age of social media, the public has been trained to believe that personal opinion is just as valid as expert knowledge. Nichols calls this epistemic egalitarianism, the belief that all ideas have equal authority. In higher education, this mindset appears in the belief that everyone can and should succeed academically with minimal struggle. It appears in grade inflation. It appears in the expectation that faculty should accommodate everything. And it appears in the assumption that academic standards must bend to the needs, preferences, and comfort of every student. When expertise loses respect, educational rigor collapses. When rigor collapses, lifelong learning becomes a feel-good slogan rather than a meaningful practice. Joel Stein pushes this conversation further in defense of elitism. Stein argues that elitism is not a dirty word. Elitism, when understood correctly, is simply the belief that excellence matters, that mastery matters, that some ideas, arguments, and performances are better than others. Stein points out that if every opinion is treated as equally valid, then the very concept of knowledge becomes meaningless. This perspective aligns with Aristotle's understanding of virtue. We develop excellence by striving toward higher standards, not by lowering the bar so that everyone can step over it comfortably. True education asks us to rise. It does not meet us at the lowest possible level of effort. When universities treat exclusivity as inherently unjust, they forget that exclusivity is what gives achievement its value. If everyone receives the same credential regardless of performance, the credential ceases to function as a signal of competence. The assigned readings from this class also echo this concern. Christina Gordon writes in the IAFOR journal about internal experiences of lifelong learners. She emphasizes that lifelong earners require autonomy, discipline, self-reflection, and intrinsic motivation. It is not passive. It is not automatic. It is not guaranteed simply by having access to online courses or certified programs. Gordon's framing highlights the internal qualities needed for lifelong learning to be transformative. Alexa Wesley's NASPA brief on adult learners reinforces this. She argues that adult learners need structured support. They do not need diminished expectations. Adult learners succeed when programs are intentionally designed for their realities, not when standards are lowered to avoid discomfort. Daphne Kohler's TED Talk presents online access as a solution to global inequity, using South Africa as an example of unmet demand. But the problem in the United States is different. Our problem is not scarcity, it is saturation. We have abundant access to courses, content, and credentials, but we lack the coherent standards and seriousness that give learning its value. This brings us to the core paradox. When higher education pursues inclusivity without equal commitment to rigor, it creates systems that are broad but shallow. Everyone is admitted, but few are challenged. Everyone earns credentials, but fewer demonstrate mastery. Everyone feels welcome, but fewer are transformed. Credential inflation, grade inflation, and widespread reliance on generative AI are symptoms of the same underlying confusion. Universities have mistaken popularity for purpose. They have mistaken access for achievement. Now I want to offer a series of practical strategies for institutions that want to expand lifelong learning without compromising excellence. It is easy to critique the system, but solutions matter. The readings from this course, combined with the work of Haidt, Nichols, and Stein, point toward a set of guiding principles. The first strategy is intentional design for adult learners. Adult learners bring life experience, responsibility, and motivation. They do not need watered-down curriculum. They need flexible structures that respect their time. They need coherent program pathways. They need advisors who understand work and family responsibilities. But they also need high expectations inside the classroom. Adult learners thrive when they are supported and challenged. Support without challenge is condescending. Challenge without support is punitive. The balance between the two is what makes lifelong learning meaningful. The second strategy is restoring assessment integrity. When mastery becomes optional, education loses its credibility. Universities need honest assessments that measure learning rather than mere participation. This includes clear rubrics, rigorous writing requirements, faculty development for maintaining standards in online environments, and renewed focus on academic integrity in the age of artificial intelligence. When students can generate essays instantly, the institution's responsibility is not to lower standards, but to redesign assessments that reward genuine thought. A third strategy is philosophical recalibration. Universities must move away from optics-driven decision-making and return to principles grounded in wisdom. Aristotle's concept of phronesis, or practical wisdom, is crucial here. Institutions must cultivate leaders who balance care with fairness, inclusion with excellence, and support with accountability. Without this balance, institutions drift into moral absolutism. Policies become symbolic rather than effective. Leaders prioritize avoiding conflict rather than pursuing truth. A fourth strategy is refusing to equate content with education. Putting elite courses online does not create elite education. Education is not simply the transfer of information. It is the relational and developmental process. It requires mentorship, dialogue, community, and the willingness to confront difficult ideas. Online learning can expand access, but if it becomes the dominant mode, universities risk losing the very qualities that make higher education transformational. The final strategy is in restoring intellectual seriousness as a cultural norm. Stein reminds us that excellence is aspirational. Students rise when institutions expect them to rise. This means creating cultures where disagreement is welcomed rather than feared, where standards are explicit rather than hidden, and where students are asked to push beyond comfort into genuine growth. It means not just meeting students where they're at, but raising the bar and holding it there for them to rise above. It also means restoring philosophy as a foundational element of general education. Without the ability to think well, lifelong learning becomes little more than content consumption. Now I want to ground these ideas in my own experience at SOU. I am a non-traditional student. I returned to higher education later in life, after years of working, raising a family, and navigating the responsibilities of adulthood. My experience here at Southern Oregon University has been transformative, but not because the path was made easy. It was transformative because professors held high expectations and expected me to meet them. When I struggled, they supported me, but they never diminished the standard. That made all the difference. The classes that changed me were not the comfortable ones. They were the demanding ones. If faculty had lowered expectations to make my journey more inclusive, I would not be the student or scholar I am today. This matters for SOU because we are a regional public institution with strong commitment to inclusivity. That commitment is a strength, but inclusivity without excellence becomes hollow. We see this tension on campus. We see it in the pressure to pass students who are not meeting standards. We see it in the contradiction between land acknowledgments and the inability to protect Native student spaces. We see it in the clash between academic integrity policies and the widespread use of generative AI. These contradictions reveal the deeper issue. Higher education has not reconciled inclusivity with rigor. It has not yet found a way to serve everyone without lowering expectations for someone. SOU is uniquely positioned to lead in this area. We are small enough to be personal and flexible. We are diverse enough to learn from multiple perspectives, and we have a faculty who genuinely cares about the craft of teaching. But caring is not enough. Institutions need moral courage. They need the willingness to make decisions that prioritize excellence, even when those decisions are unpopular. That means protecting academic rigor, maintaining honest assessment, and resisting the temptation to dilute curriculum in the name of accessibility. For me, lifelong learning is not a slogan. It is my lived reality. It is the reason I am pursuing graduate work. It is the foundation of my personal and professional goals. And it is a reminder that education only has value when it pushes us beyond what we thought we could do. If institutions like SOU can uphold that balance between inclusivity and excellence, lifelong learning can be more than a buzzword. It could be a path to real transformation. Beyond SOU, the broader implications for higher education policy are significant. If universities continue expanding access while lowering standards, degrees will become increasingly symbolic. This undermines employer trust, student motivation, and economic purpose of education. If universities instead adopt a balanced model grounded in rigor, assessment integrity, mentorship, and philosophical clarity, they can create systems where lifelong learning is not just continuous, but meaningful. They can prepare students for a world where learning never stops, while also preserving the value of achievement. They can cultivate graduates who think deeply, act wisely, and contribute meaningfully to society. Lifelong learning should not be a passive drift through endless micro-credentials and online modules. It should be an intentional, rigorous, and ethically grounded journey. Universities have the responsibility to shape that journey with seriousness and clarity. I believe they can do it, and I believe the readings, thinkers, and ideas explored in this presentation offer the roadmap for how. Thank you.